All right, everybody, thank you for being here. So, welcome to Real Raw Health with your hosts, Nikki Burnett of Taste Life Nutrition and Matt Rowe of Parsley Pet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and the health our pets bring to us with love. And Nikki and I always touch into a little human health as well because we're passionate about that stuff.
That's
So,
what
we're
we
so glad you're here. And welcome, Nikki, to this week's show.
Thank you. Thank you. As always, I'm super excited because this one's kind of gross, so it's fun.
Yeah, it is kind of gross. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about worms. So we're going to talk about worms, and we're going to talk about how we get worms and how we can't get worms, and then what we do for worms.
I'm petrified because I have a fear that you're going to tell me something. I was like, oh my God, I do that. Like, I'm going to get worms. I have worms, Nikki.
Something tells me that you know better.
I hope so. There's a
You
lot of
know,
things I wished I knew better, and then it just doesn't happen. Yeah.
it's true. You know what though? So I do with my human clients, I do testing to look at the microbiome and that kind of thing. And there is a place in the test that looks for worms. Um, Thankfully, in my human clients to date, I've never seen any worms. It makes me really happy.
Yeah. Mhm. I think that would be a difficult phone conversation. Hey, Susan. Yeah, the test came back. No, everything looked good. You have worms, by the way. But that's just besides the point. I mean, how do you introduce that? But this is why I'm really happy we focus on dogs on this
Yeah,
show.
it's normal in dogs or normal-ish, but
Yeah,
humans not as
ish.
much. Ish.
How does no? Hold on. The show is can my dog get worms from eating raw?
So straight up, the answer is no.
Is it because
Okay, show's over.
answer's no? All right. So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
So when they're doing it, is it because that pH level in their stomach is so acidic that anything that is alive that enters that stomach just gets killed almost immediately?
I mean, yeah. And so, as you know, kind of like what we talked about last week, that pH can change. If they're eating foods like kibble, and foods that are not, high carbohydrate foods, if they're getting too many vegetables or if they're getting too many fruits or whatever the case may be, that pH can change. And so, could that create an environment where they're more likely to get something, whether it's bacteria or yeast or maybe worms? Sure. So, I would say when they're out, I think typically they get worms from each other, from other animals, from eating poop, from, exposures like that. As far as I know, and maybe differently, as far as I know, from being fed raw meat, not worms. Now, there can be bacteria and things like that maybe they get. I don't typically worry about things like salmonella and stuff with animals because their stomach is so acidic, and if they're eating, good healthy raw meat and not old nasty meat, then in most cases they're going to be fine. Personally, I've never heard of a case of salmonella in a dog. Now, that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. I don't know if you have, but I feed our dogs like I would feed us, good healthy meats from good healthy animals.
Mhm.
If I liked eating raw meat, I would eat it raw. I eat it rare, but just raw is not quite my thing.
Yeah, you want to go tartar right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
so yeah, no, I've had this conversation with Dr. Kojar, our doctor at Parsley Pet, and
Mhm,
also Dr. Jasek, who I run a show with on Wednesdays.
mhm.
And we have had this question on both is, this big salmonella scare that you see come after raw feeders like Answers. These poor people at Answers have been in court more times defending that their product is not making dogs sick and they sell a raw based food product. And what they proved was your dog cannot get salmonella from the food. Now, it's the same way that if you buy raw meat for yourself, ground beef, and you take it home and you go to cook it, that raw meat, when you open the package, yeah, it has a probability if you let it sit out, is going to get salmonella on it. So I think with your dog food as well, if you're feeding raw, is making sure that you're not thawing out food 3 days further in advance. So for example, when I get food, I only thaw food for today, tomorrow, and the next day.
Yeah.
And then I always cycle in there. So I never have in the fridge more than 3 days worth of food thawing out.
Hmm.
Just like our own food, we don't want to eat old chicken or old meat in the refrigerator that's been there for a week. That's all
Hmm.
thawed out. We
Yeah.
would consider that bad and
Hmm.
we would get rid of it. But
Yeah.
for our dogs, we're like, it should be following that same protocol.
Hmm.
Is you're sitting there, yes, you are going to feed them raw. You are not going to cook it. You're going to give it to them as if they were in the wild. But in that means that you have to have some care in how you handle the food.
Sure. Sure. So I was thinking about a story, and I don't know that there's proof in this, but it is an interesting story. I think that I have it's my sister-in-law's mother who ended up with a parasite, and so the doctor asked her, "Have you been feeding your dog raw meat?" And she's like, "Yeah." So, and I don't know the quality of the meat, but she did. They think that she got. I don't know if it was parasite, it was bacteria, it was something from this meat. And the thing about it, it did make her sick. She just lost a bunch of weight. I'm like, I want that. Not really.
Still
But
more
anyway,
healthy, but yeah, that it works.
the point to that, for one, is there can be pathogens on meat. We all know it. We've had food poisoning, that kind of thing. But
Mhm,
our GI is very different than a dog's GI. It's a rare day that dogs get sick from, especially fresh meat. Now,
mhm,
we've seen dogs eat lots of really terrible things and not
mhm.
get sick, but they've also eaten some things and they go and they throw it up, and usually it's fine unless we get into some kind of toxic
Right.
substance. So those are the things we certainly want to avoid. But, I mean, it's just, they're very different than we are. And that
Mhm,
they have been God given the ability to be able to scavenge. That's what they
mhm.
do.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, getting back to the worms, I think that that's a lot of times what can happen, because we have mouse poop and raccoon poop and all of these things, and dogs like
Mhm,
to roll and poop and eat poop and do whatever it is
mhm.
that they do. Not
Right.
ideal, but it can happen. And
Mhm,
so, I think what my biggest the thing that I want to be the biggest takeaway for anybody who's listening to this right now from this show is, it's not necessary to prophylactically deworm every year, every 6 months. I never ever deworm my dogs. We have to remember that this is a toxin and we're
mhm,
putting it in them. I think sometimes it's every 6 months, sometimes it's once a year. I don't know what it is. I will always, though, do the testing. Yes, do a
mm,
fecal, check for heartworms. Let's do the
mhm.
testing. Let's understand before we just go, yeah, let's just feed them all of this toxic junk that has
Mhm.
the potential and likely will shorten their life over time.
Yeah. I think that individuals that if they're not feeding raw and they're feeding kibble under the fear that they could be feeding worms to their dogs or their dog could get worms from eating raw, I think it's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, you're going to feed a kibble that is going to shorten the lifespan of your dog. When
significant.
they know this, that 50% of dogs over the age of 10 today are going to get cancer.
Yeah.
And so, with that, when you talk to Dr. Judy, being the cancer vet, she goes, Matt, that's incorrect. 2/3 of dogs
Yeah.
are getting cancer today because of the foods that they eat. So, there's a much higher risk for health conditions in your dog if you feed kibble versus feeding raw. And really, raw is easy to protect. Treat it like your own food.
Yeah. If you
You
if
know,
you're gonna eat it, the dogs can eat it. I mean,
right.
as far as
And it's raw and
Mhm.
keep it raw. Don't degrade the nutrients out of the food by cooking it. Now, we
Mhm.
can't eat raw. I mean, we can,
You
but our
can.
stomachs are pH balance in our stomach. We can't fight all the pathogens that may potentially come in from eating raw, like all the
We're
bacteria and
much
stuff
more
like that.
susceptible.
In our
Yeah.
bodies, we are omnivores as
Mhm.
human beings. So we eat meat and vegetables. And so essentially, we've got to lean towards that and what we should eat as humans. Now,
Yeah.
your dog is a carnivore and he
Mhm.
should eat things that carnivores eat.
Yeah.
And so, with it, I love how you mentioned that they're scavengers
Mhm.
because that's it. When my dog goes outside, he's running around. He's not looking for vegetables. He's looking for dead rabbits.
Or just running squirrels. Okay, I'm gonna get you now. Yeah,
In the hopes that he gets to eat a running squirrel. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's what they will. They
yeah,
will eat food that they find.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's important. It's always important to know, just like with us, go get your dogs a checkup, and always do the testing. I will tell you, I always do the testing. I always make sure that they're healthy. Sage, oh gosh, Sage, when we got her, that poor girl, she was so full of worms. I'd never seen anything like it. So we definitely dewormed her.
Mhm,
And then whatever came up, it was madness. It was like it was purely insane. And
mhm.
that is in and of itself going to be super toxic and damaging to a dog. I don't even
Right.
know what they were, but it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. So you get a dog, you don't know the dog, so you're rescuing a dog, you might have to deworm, right? It's gonna.
Mhm.
What I do know too, sorry, I'm sort of jumping around a little bit.
No, you're good.
There are natural methods for deworming as well as protecting your dog.
Mm,
What I would say though, especially with some of these animals, I mean, drugs and medicines are there for a reason. And with Sage, as much as she had, I don't think I would have gone the natural route no matter what. I think I would have just done the ivermectin and just
mhm.
been done with it. Because I think, I mean, I can't imagine that they weren't causing any damage.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say congratulations on putting some logic into it.
Yeah, I
Anytime
mean,
we
I think that's
push
how we have to
against
do it.
pharmaceuticals, yeah, you let your intuition kind of come forth and saying, no, this is a moment that I need some more advanced care.
Yeah, yeah. And those are the things that we have to think about. I try to be as natural and as healthy as I possibly can.
Mhm,
But just like in human medicine, where veterinary, uh, Western veterinary medicine shines,
mhm,
is in acute care. They keep dogs alive. They keep animals alive. They
mhm,
help with these acute situations that need to be dealt with immediately. But where those in functional medicine, functional veterinary medicine,
mhm,
functional nutrition come into play is once we figure out what that root cause is, we need to eliminate that root cause in order to help
mhm.
to deal with whatever chronic condition that we're dealing with. So,
Yeah.
something like, pancreatitis, this is a little off topic, but it can be acute and it can become chronic.
Mhm,
So we have to have the vet deal with the acute situation, but if it becomes chronic, then we have to understand what we can do in order to help
mhm.
the pancreas function as optimally as we can, right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's where you started to mention that root cause of where it's coming from.
right.
So as we get back to worms, so what was Sage's, do you know anything about Sage's history prior to you getting her?
No, not at all. She was in a small high kill shelter in
Mhm,
Texas, and we just pulled her. I saw her. She was on the Saving Carolina Dog, and
mhm,
there was some reason why the rescue couldn't grab her. They couldn't find anybody, whatever it was. And I just had my best friend and her husband was like, "Please go get this dog for me." She was a
mhm,
wild child, so I knew nothing, and she was at least a year old, give or take.
mhm,
So prior to that point, was she on her own? She is a little bit of a wild child, so she could have
mhm,
been just wild from a puppy, or somebody let
mhm.
her go because she was a wild child. She's
Yeah.
older now and she's pretty cool and chill. She has her moments, but yeah. So I don't know her history, but it was in Texas, and Texas has
Mhm,
all kinds of worms. They have all kinds of heartworms. They're really bad for heartworms. Our other girl, we
mhm.
talked about Daisy, who we brought back up here,
Yeah.
with heartworms, which
It
is
doesn't
another.
often reach below 52 degrees, which kills the heartworm.
Right, right. Yeah.
Mhm,
So yeah, so we have people who are in Texas who listen to this. So, paying attention, up here, I know you don't ever do heartworm. I did it once this year.
mhm,
But if you're in Texas and watch those temperatures, because it could be November, December, January, February. Maybe you don't, and maybe even longer than that, you don't have to
mhm.
worry about it at all. We want to give these things as little as possible. And if we
Right.
can not give them at all, that's even better. But Texas is so bad. It's so bad for heartworms. And
Yeah.
Florida and, Louisiana. Yeah.
Really humid environments. And so, other worms are coming out. So why I asked about where you thought like Sage may have grown up, but you're saying that she was wild. I mean, she was a wild child. She was out there. She was doing it.
Oh
So
yeah.
she's drinking out of water, like
Oh, yeah.
water basins to get water that potentially have worms in it that they've gotten from other wild animals that are around, from other dogs if they interact with other dogs, and she eats their poop and that dog has worms. So there's all these different propensities that could actually create worms. So if you live in a clean environment, clean water sources, the dogs around you, where they're hanging out, where they're going, what they're eating, I think you're pretty safe to think and say that my dog does not have worms, but
Yeah.
definitely go get them checked if you're ever concerned, have them tested.
Mhm.
Go to your vet and have that done. But along these lines, they're not going to get it from raw feeding. That's
No.
like saying you got worms from making your dinner tonight
Right.
with chicken or ground beef or whatever meat you used. You would have gotten worms from that. I don't think we bump into many people at dinner parties that say, "Yeah, I got worms again from that raw meat I bought." No, I mean, no one's going to say this. So, I mean, this is along some of those lines yeah, I think that's why I commended you for your logic and common sense in your treatment protocol, because I think in a lot of what we do, we have to put logic and common sense into it.
Yeah. And I'll make another point too, is not one time in the time that I've had dogs and I've been working with them in more natural methods and feeding them raw and not vaccinating them all the time and not deworming them all the time.
Mhm,
So it's been at minimum 10 years, if not longer. But
mhm,
not one time have I had a dog who's been under my care who has gotten worms. Now, when I brought them in from rescue, sure, it can happen,
mhm.
but not a single time. So I'm really, really comfortable with not deworming, and I make it very clear when I go to the vet: do not deworm, do not vaccinate. We test first, and then we go from there. And we decide what we need to do.
Yep.
That's
I
how I
love it.
practice, right? I mean, that's how you practice. You don't just give supplements. Talk about a
Mhm,
waste of money. You don't just give things. You don't just give
mhm,
medicine. Why do we do that in dogs? Why do we just go, oh well, they could have worms, or they could have heartworms, or they could have this or that.
mhm,
So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to give them, fill them full of this toxic mumbo jumbo
mhm.
just because we don't. I guess we do that a little bit with us as we vaccinate for, as children. So there is a little bit
Right.
of that. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
So
it's frustrating.
I have a question. So if I have that thought in my head, so all of our viewers, all of our listeners right now, if they're sitting there and they're like, I wonder if my dog has worms. I wonder if that's why they're vomiting. I wonder if that's sick. What is their first step? What should they do?
Get them a checkup. I mean, if they haven't
Okay.
had a checkup, I mean, I mean, and maybe there's something else, but I think, if they're vomiting, if they're doing things more often than they should,
Hmm.
I think it's smart to go to somebody who can do the testing. So whether it's blood work or urinalysis or, a stool test to test for worms, or, heartworms are only going to come out in the blood.
Sure.
Um, but I think we have to have a baseline,
Okay.
So do you have another thought?
No, I was thinking about that as saying, I think right along the lines is go see your vet, have a test done. Test if they have worms before you treat the worms.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And
For
then
sure.
come in. Have you heard of any natural methods that help with removing worms, or is it really just kind of going the pharmaceutical route?
I think that there are, and I'll be honest with you that I was gonna look some up, and I didn't.
Oh,
So
that's okay.
I know though, because I always go to Karen Becker,
Hmm.
natural, um, worm.
So what she looks that up is you're looking at is there are some individuals out there that have done some raw feeding. So like Dr. Karen Becker is a great resource for you to go take a look at, like Nikki had said. Dr. Lori Koger on my team, you can actually contact us. We'll do some research for you that if your dog does have worms and how to mitigate it and get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay. So real quick. Oh, it's so cool. It's so fun. So natural dewormer for dogs, cats, and more. So we have dried sage, oregano. Oregano is amazing, period.
Hmm.
Oregano is such an amazing antimicrobial.
Yep.
Sage has really high antioxidants. So we got pumpkin seeds, thyme. So this is really not a lot different than what we would do for ourselves for
Hmm.
antimicrobials.
Yep.
Red clover, fennel, hyssop, papaya seeds. Oh my gosh, papaya seeds are crazy dewormers, like an anti-parasitic, and they're awful. Have you ever tried a papaya seed?
Super peppery.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
awful. But they're really good. You'll see them in antimicrobials a lot.
Hmm.
Rosemary, mint. Oh, but can be too strong for dogs and cats. Oh, diatomaceous earth. It's a good one. That's a really good one. So you
Okay.
can give that internally or externally. And I've done that with the dogs. We go to Kansas or Texas and they end up getting fleas. I'm like, okay, we're gonna just douse you in diatomaceous earth, and it works
Right.
beautifully. My vet at the time, who was very allopathic, sort of Western medicine, she was like,
Mhm.
"Why don't you just let me give him something? Why would you even try diatomaceous earth? It's not gonna work." I'm like, "Just watch me." And he
Just like,
did. It was awesome.
you are the last resort. You're the pharmaceutical is the last resort
It's
I'm gonna pop in.
true. It's true. I'm going to do everything else. I'm going to research my tail off. I'm going to go to
Hmm.
you. I'm going to go anywhere that I know because I feel like I have some really trustworthy sources, and I'm going to do that first. And
Hmm.
then, yes, if there's an acute situation, then we go to drugs.
Absolutely. So
So,
this has been awesome. So really, if you think your dog has worms, they didn't get it from raw feeding. Unless you're not following good health standards on making sure that the food is protected like you would do for yourself. So if you're feeding under good standards and you are actually watching the actual how long it's sitting out in your refrigerator, that type of stuff,
yeah.
your dog's not going to get worms from eating raw. They're going to get worms from external sources. But if
Mhm.
you think your dog has worms, have go get tested.
Mhm.
And then, like Nikki looked up with Dr. Becker, she's got some great natural resources that you can go and try to address the worms and their health naturally under that pre-context. If it's really bad, like Sage was, like Nikki's dog was, then go the pharmaceutical route. Have a conversation with your vet. But this is why I love holistic veterinarians. This is why I like they take time listening to you. They
Yeah.
take time talking about it. I mean, like Dr. Jasek will do a telemedicine. You don't even have to be in Denver. And
Yeah.
she'll say, okay, yeah, over Zoom, let's have a conversation about your dog. We can have the test done. We can get all this taken care of for you.
Yeah.
But also to have a conversation with doctor to give you that peace of mind
Hmm.
and how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but also, I want to say this very delicately. Don't just because they may have a differing opinion than you,
Mhm.
which maybe they have to have this sort of treatment, they have to have this sort of medication, they have to have this, there is no other way.
Mhm.
Understand that they're trained in a very special or a particular way, right? They're
Mhm.
trained differently than those who are maybe in functional veterinary medicine. And just like, allopathic medicine versus naturopathic or functional medicine, there's a different way of training. And so, what I know is when, as a patient or a client or a dog parent, pet parent, there are a lot of things that we don't know. And we can
Mhm.
become overwhelmed and insecure about what we know because they
Mhm.
have so much more education, and they do, than a lot of us, not all of us. But do your research, stand your ground if you're seeing somebody in allopathic medicine, and know that many times there are other directions besides drugs. There may not be, but that's where you go to the people who know, you feel that's why we do this. Ask us questions, ask Matt questions, do his
Mhm.
testing. He has an amazing test. It could be that whatever the problems are coming from is from nutrient deficiency or toxicities.
Mhm.
So know it's that second and third opinion, getting the information as much as you can, but finding
Mhm.
the sources that are trustworthy, because you can go to WebMD or to, Dr. Google or Vet Google or whatever you want to do. And
Yeah.
you're going to get so much stuff that it's going to be so confusing and frustrating. So
Mhm.
find your people who you trust, right? So
Mhm.
I trust Dr. Jasek. I trust Dr. Karen Becker. I trust a few
Mhm.
people to go to. I trust you if I need to bounce something off or figure something out, or if I have a client who I am unsure about.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll tell you, not to extend too long, but I actually processed the test last night and got it to the pet parent. This dog, its main issues was seizures, and they tried everything they could for the seizures. We tested the dog, and when I ran the report last night, its mercury levels was twice above the dangerous level of mercury inside this dog's body. And so our vet, like, we go all in when something like that happens,
mhm,
because when they look at that and they're trying to treat these seizures with pharmaceutical medication, they don't realize that it's mercury poisoning is what this dog is going through. And so, because we had a conversation with this pet parent today and said, hey, we are going to need to address this is ASAP, take care of it, but you have to do it slowly. And then we got her in touch with some healthcare practitioners and doctors that can slowly chelate out the mercury out of the dog's system, because if you do it too fast, it'll kill them,
yeah.
and if you just go really slow out of the system. So we are hoping, I'll give you guys an update on that, that in the next 30 days, this dog's seizures will stop.
Where
And
do
so
they know where it's coming from? Could it be from
um,
vaccinations?
vaccinations is what we think, is she was doing vaccinations, 3 of them every year. And this dog was 7 years old. And so we think, we can't say definitively where they were getting it, but it's
Mhm.
something as exploring what is in your external environment as well. Where do you live? What water do you drink? What type of things do you consume? What things are around the house? Are they eating things? Are they eating furniture? Are they doing some of this stuff? And that's where it's like we just got to just peel layers off while the vet is removing this mercury out of the dog's body.
So interesting.
It was one of those that when I go to process tests and I look at it, I was like, oh shit. And
Yeah.
then you're trying to get all the information, and then the email sent to them, like, you don't want to say critical, you need to jump on this right away, being like, we are very concerned.
Mhm,
We got to
mhm.
figure out where the source is, and you have to remove it. Call these people. They can help you.
So I think, gosh, I feel like we're going too long, but I can't help it. The thing that we need to understand about these types of toxins, and I know this to be the case with humans, so I am assuming it's the case with animals. I don't think that this is something that's studied. If it is, I just don't know about it. With humans, there's some of us who have genetic issues with the ability, and when we have the inability to detoxify certain toxins. Mercury is one of them. So in
Yep.
people who are predisposed to Alzheimer's disease, a lot of them, or most of them, don't have the ability to get rid of, to detoxify mercury, and
Hmm.
so mercury
Yep.
sits, it's super toxic.
Hmm.
And so, you know, these toxicities can create symptoms like Parkinson's. And we put a diagnosis on it, but really it's something else. It's whatever the symptoms are. And so my it has to be the same. We're all genetic beings. It has to be the same, that for
Yep.
animals, they have certain genetic, call them mutations, we call them polymorphisms,
Mhm.
that aren't functioning properly, essentially because of the way that they're fed, because of stress, because of the environment. We have to put what we know about humans right now and put it on animals. And if you have this animal who doesn't have the ability to detoxify mercury properly,
Mhm.
then stuff like that's going to happen, and these seizures
Yep.
can happen. And so
Yep.
it makes sense. It's not going to happen to every dog, just like it's not going to happen to every human, because maybe
Mhm.
some dogs better have the ability to eliminate the mercury that's in the vaccine or wherever it's coming from,
Mhm.
but
Yep.
some don't.
That is a great point that you just made, is that, yeah, and you take a look at their nutrition. If they're eating, kibble and they're inflamed. I mean, and their immune system is starting to get knocked down because of the glyphosate that's in there and the lack of gut microbiota. You're just taking everything out that can actually help them and remove some of these heavy metals out of their system. So yeah, so when you made the point and you're taking a look at what are the sources, where is this coming from, going towards your logic and starting to sit there and say, whether they're worms or not, how am I going to treat it, where should I go, and then all of those things that happen throughout the day with your dog that are unexplained, there is an answer.
Yeah.
There is something out
Yeah.
there, and there are doctors that will take time with you
Mhm.
and talk about it and find the true root cause
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. It's a perfect ending.
So thank you, Nikki. What is the best way somebody can get a hold of you?
Everything is Taste Life Nutrition. So the website,
Awesome.
the social media, everything's Taste Life Nutrition. So we're all over the place. The only thing that's not is so this show, which is of course Real Raw Health, and then I have another show with the health coach that works with me with my clients, and we call it Functional Friday.
Awesome.
So so those are the two Facebook lives that we do. That's not Taste Life Nutrition, but I'm gonna plug again that we have another one of our challenges coming up on November 9th so this is for humans. You can do it with your dog, take the sugar out and start feeding your dog raw. I mean, it's a perfect challenge, but
Awesome. Great idea.
yeah, it's good. So you can go to my website and it's going to have a button there that will take you to the link to fill out the information to get into the challenge. So it's a free challenge.
Awesome.
And it's just a sort of an intro to what it's like to do this 12-week course that I've co-created. And it's a really cool, comprehensive, sorry, I have a hair, it's in my eye, course that is, wow, that is something special. That is, it's mind, body, mindset, movement, nutrition, recipes, videos, assessments. I mean, it's
Right.
yeah, so good stuff. We're super excited about it.
I've taken the free challenge of Nikki's. Mind blowing. Like really, when I started to go into it, and it was simple, like really just an introduction on what sugar does inside your body. And I was like, well, where's sugar showing up in everything I eat? And then my eyes open, being like, oh my God, there was sugar in there. I didn't
Yeah.
even realize it. Started to, because of just doing that, I started to sleep better. My arms quit falling asleep. I started to stop sweating so much at night.
Your arms quit falling
Actually,
asleep. That's cool.
yeah, that was a whole nother issue. But because of the sugar, I don't think that where that nerve that ran through no longer was getting inflamed or something was inflaming right there. So when I actually removed that, I actually slept through the night. So definitely take your time, take this course, step into it, engage with Nikki. She's got such a broad breadth of all of her knowledge that it was brilliant, eye-opening, and I didn't know I could feel this good. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
And if you ever want to get a hold of us, parsleypet.com, if you want your dog tested for their nutrients and see if your dog is receiving the right diet for themselves and for their body, parsleypet.com will have your test analyzed by a veterinarian. That veterinarian will give you suggestions on things that you can do. I just don't want to give you a test and give you numbers. I want to give you a test and what to do about it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Nikki, for all your wisdom today. It is so
Oh, thank
appreciated.
you. Thank you. And I say it probably not enough, but testing is the best source of information. It's literally, almost literally, our dogs or our own bodies talking to us. It's how we can really see inside. And it's such a minimal cost for the amount of information that you get and the long-term information that you get to be able to understand what your dog needs and doesn't need, and how to go about feeding what they truly need in their diet. So and I'll say this, we've been doing this almost a year now,
Has
which
it
is,
been a year?
yeah, I think we started in January. I know. But from the time that we met each other and you told me about this test that you have, like I've been waiting for years for functional lab testing for dogs. And I just was so excited, and I still am. So it's a great test. So
Thank
do
you.
it, try it, learn about your dog, learn about yourself. I mean, it's the best way for us to take care of ourselves, our family, our communities. That's
Yeah.
what we need.
Yeah. Knowing is better.
Mhm.
So thank you, Nikki. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. I know we had a little bit longer of a show today, but as soon I love how you started the show. Can you get worms from eating raw? No, show's done. And then we end up going for like another 40 minutes. So this is just these topics of our health is so
Mhm.
important. And
Yeah.
this is something that we just appreciate all of you guys for being a part of it with us. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. All right.
You guys
Thanks,
enjoy your
everybody.
weekends. Have fun.
See you later.
See ya.